Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. We're doing something a little bit different in this episode, and we're actually going to take on a repair job. Now, I typically do not do repair work, as if I can work with brand new materials and make brand new parts, I would much rather do that than dealing with old, grimy, used parts that we're just trying to put back together. But this was a rare instance when I agreed to do a repair job, as the application and the material used on this particular part are interesting and something that I knew I could help with. So what we are working on is this, and this is the backside of it right here. But this is a Lamborghini Aventador exhaust system. And before we get started, I'm going to be transparent in saying that I'm not going to name the manufacturer of the exhaust, nor am I going to name the shop whose repair job we're going to be repairing, as my intent with this video is not to cast stones at anybody. My intent is to show the process and the do's and don'ts of a titanium repair job, and maybe we can all learn something from it. So let me spin this around and show you guys exactly what we have going on. Actually, I spun it the wrong way. So the backstory is, supposedly this customer, he contacted me the other day and said, hey, I have this exhaust, can you repair it? I said, yeah, no big deal. I figured that, or the way that it was explained to me, I just had to do a couple of quick crack repairs. Wasn't going to be a big deal. But when he brought the exhaust to me, supposedly the shop that was doing his maintenance on the car spotted a couple of cracks where these mounting brackets are located on the exhaust system and decided they were going to try to repair them. And if we look at what they did, that is not good. And then on this side, that is even not gooder. So it's hard to tell exactly what happened. This almost looks like stainless steel filler rod to me. And essentially what they did is take this rectangular section of tube where this bracket mounts to, ruined it on this side, and on this side they were well on their way to ruining it as well. So we need to fix this, and we need to make this exhaust whole again for this customer. And from what I was told, this is a very expensive exhaust system, as most parts for a Lamborghini or another exotic would be. But at the end of the day, it's just titanium. So I can certainly, or hopefully certainly, fix this up. So what we're going to do is essentially cut this section of the tube out on both sides, get rid of all the metal that this other shop had put down, and do our best to patch it up and have it look at least more aesthetically appealing than what it does right now. So I have 2 fresh bottles of argon, I have a fresh pack of cutoff wheels, and I guess without further ado, let's go ahead and get to it. I went ahead on both sides and marked out my cut lines. So we're going to cut all the way out to here to try to get away from all the metal that this other shop had put in here. And since I don't know exactly what filler material they used for this, I want to cut all of it out. So we're starting with what I know is good titanium, as opposed to whatever mixture of metals they ended up with this thing. So I have my lines marked out. Like I said, here's this side. See, marked around, and this side marked around as well. And now we'll simply just come in and cut those areas of this tubing out, and then we'll have to put some new sheet metal in. So let me get geared up, and we'll get to throwing some sparks. The first portion of the surgery on this Aventador exhaust is completed. So I came in, and this bracket went here, and the other one obviously went on the other side, something like that. So This one right here obviously was not long for this world, and this one here, you can see with all this white chalkiness on the inside, the other shop 100% did not back purge this, and like I said, I'm not confident they even used the correct material as far as filler material goes for this. But like I said at the beginning, we're not casting stones, we're just here to repair this exhaust. So if you see some of the little puddles of liquid on the ground, I did my normal trick when cutting titanium with abrasives. Hose it down with anti-spatter spray just to keep any metal debris or abrasive debris from impregnating itself into the surface of the metal. Especially these tips that have this pretty interesting coloration and coating on them. I really did not want to mess those up, as we're already doing enough to the system. I don't want to cause any other issues with it. So now that we are at this point, I can go ahead and on the inside where there's a bunch of debris and what have you there, I can go ahead and actually clean that up and then get it ready for new metal to be put in its place. All of the prep work on the main portion of the exhaust is done. So I went ahead, obviously cut those sections out. I deburred, I prepped the inside, I prepped the outside, and this thing is ready to receive patches. So what I'm going to do is take some pre-existing titanium tubing that I have here and use that as the sheet metal, since it obviously already has a nice curve and a nice arc in it. And I'll use that to make the patches for this. So all I need to do is figure out the length and the width of the patches on both sides, obviously, cut pieces to suit, trim, fit, so on and so forth. And in the not too distant future, we'll be ready to start welding on this thing. Both of the patches are now in place on the Aventador exhaust. So here is the first one that I did. Fits pretty nicely. It's tacked a bunch of different places around it, so it isn't going to go anywhere during the welding process. And here is the other side. And this one was a little bit trickier to fit, as the shape of it isn't exactly rectangular, and it had to go on the inside and the outside of a bend. So I did the best I could fitting it on there. It will do its job perfectly fine. And right now we are flowing argon onto the inside of this. So I'm giving it a few minutes to purge out. And then once we have a good back purge, and I'm confident that we're working with as inert of an environment on the inside of this exhaust as we can, I'll fire the welder back up, strike an arc, and at that point, we'll get these patches burnt in and get ready to put the mounting brackets back on. we have some sweat on the flow meter, which is to be expected with the time just spent welding this thing up. So we have patches welded on both sides. I just finished this one up literally maybe 15 seconds ago. So both the patches are welded in, and I also came in and finished up the welds on the corners of each of these actual hanger brackets, which leaves the last outstanding thing being to install or reinstall the mounting brackets. Now, I am curious. I'm going to do an experiment here in a couple of minutes with what I'm assuming is stainless filler rod on, or that was applied to this piece. If I take the angle grinder and scrub it on one of these welds, the sparks should come off orange. As really titanium, you guys have seen me cut it even earlier in this video, you get these vibrant, crazy white sparks that come off of it as you're cutting it, as opposed to stainless or steel or Inconel nickel alloys, things like that. The sparks come off orange, pretty much what you would expect when you think of grinding or cutting a piece of metal. So let's do the experiment. I will touch off my wheel on the angle grinder on one of the welds, and if it comes off orange, we know pretty well what was done with this exhaust prior to it coming here and me doing this patchwork. All right, I'm all geared up, minus my headphones, but I'll put those on here in one moment. But what I'll do, so we can actually see the contrast between the two types of metal, if this is in fact stainless on here, I'll take one of these extra pieces of titanium and just lightly scrub it. So just as a reminder or a refresher of the vibrant white sparks that come off of titanium. And then if we get some normal orange sparks off of the welds on here, pretty good indication that stainless filler rod was used. So let's go ahead and try it out. Well, color me surprised. If I were a betting man, I would have bet any money that that they had used stainless rod on this. But you guys saw the sparks, and unless there was some sort of odd mixture of metal going on here, I'm pretty sure they actually used titanium rod. But that doesn't change the fact that it still needs to be cut apart. So that'll be the next order of business. The last bit that we need to accomplish today is cleaning up the mounting brackets. So cutting the bracket off of the pre-existing piece of tube that I removed on both of them. And then tomorrow I'll need to go to the shop that hopefully isn't too far away, where the car is actually located, test fit, mark, so on and so forth, to make sure that we get these brackets, or that I get these brackets in the correct location. As with the welding that was done that I'm now repairing, and I'm almost done repairing, I don't want to leave it to the shop that had done this, as all of the work that I've done up to this point could very easily be ruined if we leave it to them to do it. So I'll gear up again, get to cutting, get these things cleaned up, and then figure out where they're located tomorrow, bring it back, weld this back together, and then we should be just about wrapped up at that point in time. after a lot of grinding and sanding and everything else, and you guys may be able to see the smoke cloud in the shop right here. The brackets are cleaned up and ready to be marked out, mocked up, tack welded, and then final welded on this Lamborghini exhaust. So here's what we ended up with, and they are not the prettiest things in the world, but considering what I was working with, it'll have to do. So I have those two cleaned up, ready to go. I have these little reinforcement plates that will just go on top here. I'll weld them on, and then weld the actual mounting brackets on top of those, just to double the thickness and make this thing that much stronger, and hopefully this issue will never arise for this exhaust again. But I'm going to get out of here. I don't want to breathe in any more of the smoke than I need to. So we will reconvene tomorrow when I get back from test fitting all of this, making sure everything's good. And at that point, I can go ahead and weld all that stuff up, and this project will be a wrap. So I'll see you guys then, and we'll get the rest of this done. We are back to continue working on this Lamborghini exhaust repair. So I got obviously the patches done earlier in this video, and the time came to mount the actual upper mounting brackets on the exhaust. Now, the more that I looked at it, the more that I thought about it, as I did actually go out to the shop where the car was located to mock up and figure out where the brackets were or needed to be located, I did some elaborate tape work, and in bringing the system back, tacking the brackets on, and sitting and thinking about it more, I realized that it would be near impossible to locate the brackets in the correct positions, and I didn't want to weld them fully on and end up in the position of having to redo work and what have you. So I contacted the owner of the car, and he was nice enough to allow me to bring the car here to the shop, and now we have an Aventador in the shop. So this is one of the most interesting cars that I've had in here so far, but exhaust work is exhaust work, and we just need to finish this job up. So here's where we ended up before I decided to request the car to arrive at the shop. So I have the bracket tacked on this side, this bracket tacked on here, and just was kind of sketched out by it and just wanted to do it the right way and do it once and for all. So the exhaust goes on to those two V-bands. There is the passenger side, there is the driver's side. So what I need to do is get the brackets off of the exhaust and clean up where I have a couple of the tacks on there, bring it over, fasten it on, and then figure out where the brackets need to be located. So looking at this thing a little bit, there's some pretty trick things going on here. I mean, obviously it's Lamborghini V12, have transaxle and everything else. It's a cantilever suspension system, which those are really, really neat. And I don't know if these are factory coils or aftermarket ones, but actual adjustable coilovers, pretty neat. Have this upper chassis support here that obviously bolts on and bolts off to allow the thing to be installed or removed, or if you need to pull the engine out of it. And the one bit that was kind of funny is I actually got in this car and wrote it down off of the rollback that it arrived on, and I'm sitting in the car and rolled the window up so that way if I have to do any grinding or anything like that, I don't get metal debris all through the inside of the car for him. But I couldn't figure out how to open or how to use the interior door handle. So I had to roll the window down, open it from the outside, and the doors go vertically on this thing, hence Lambo doors, but was able to figure it out after the fact and get the windows rolled up and everything else. But all that aside, my rambling aside, I will go ahead now, put the exhaust on, and we'll start figuring this out the rest of the way. The exhaust is prepped and ready to go back on the car. So the shop was kind enough to send all of the hardware and to send these notes as far as the fastener locations. So there will be no guesswork as far as where anything's located. So at this point, I can go ahead, put the exhaust back on the car, get everything tightened down, and figure out where the locations are for these. The exhaust is roughly installed on the car, and I think I'm going to have to move the reinforcement pad on this passenger side, but that aside, we have the bracket located, we have the exhaust in its position, and this thing's almost ready to weld. So the one thing that I am not going to do is weld on this car. Now, the owner of the shop that is working on the car called me and reaffirmed what I had already been thinking, where it's one thing if you pop a fuse or pop a relay on a normal car. Now, anytime you're welding on any car, there's always the possibility that electricity can do odd things and follow odd paths, and you can end up shorting out part of the electrical system. You know, the power tries to find a path to ground or something along those lines, and you have an inoperable car. Now, if you have to replace parts on a normal car, it isn't the end of the world. But something like this, I'm not going to chance it. So what I'm going to do is come in with my handy hot glue gun, and I'm going to attempt to hot glue around the this mounting bracket just to put it in its proper location. And at that point in time, I can gently pull this whole system back out and actually put some tack welds down on it, retest fit, so on and so forth. And if all is well there, then I'll be able to weld the system up. So like I said, I'm going to pull it back out first, cut this reinforcement pad off, and I have a little bit of extra metal over here. I'll take one of these pieces, make a new mounting pad, just so it's a little bit more centered on that bracket, and at that point in time we'll be ready to move forward with the rest of this. The reinforcement panels are now welded onto the Lamborghini's exhaust. So, the welds didn't come out too badly, not my best work, but for the purpose that they are serving, they will work perfectly fine. So I'm going to let this cool down for a moment, as it's only a few seconds removed from the welding bench. And once it's cool, throw it back on the car, and we can try this hot glue trick out, or the hot glue hypothesis, and see if it actually works to hold this in place, to tack it to get all of this mounting bracketry where it needs to be. All right, now it's time for hopefully a successful hot glue trick. So all I'm going to do is come in here and put some hot glue down, hopefully in an area where I can still get in there to tack weld and be able to remove this glue. So hopefully that will be enough right there. Actually, I'll put a little bit more on that corner. And we'll let that, put a little bit on the inside here too. Additional support never hurt anybody, right? So we'll let that glue dry, or cool down rather, and then hopefully everything will stay in place as I go to pull this exhaust out to actually tack this in place. So fingers crossed that this works, because I don't really have a good solution otherwise, but we'll see what happens. The glue and tape seems to have worked fine. So, as you see, I obviously put some tape on as well, just to help it a little bit with structural integrity to move it from there to here. But I was able to get one tack on, and now I can go in and clean up the glue. As nice thing with hot glue is it just kind of peels off and doesn't really leave much of a residue or anything. So I can go in, prep this in terms of pulling all of the glue out, and then go in, put a couple more tacks on, test fit. If all is well there, we can weld this bracket and this portion of it will be completed. After I removed the tape, burnt the glue off, the bracket is now tack welded onto the exhaust. So here's what we ended up with. And if it didn't move in the process of me tack welding it, it should still fit. However, I'm going to test fit it prior to permanently welding it on here. And if the test fit goes well, pull it back off, weld the bracket on, and then we'll pretty much be done with what I can do with this exhaust right at this point in time. As the mounting bracket on the other side was cut, and I do not have the top side of that bracket right now. But we can at least get this side finished up, get it good to go, and can figure out what to do with the other side at a later date. All right, after putting the exhaust back on the Aventador, good news, everything still fits. So don't have to cut it apart again, and everything is right where it needs to be. So both the V-bands on the downpipe or header outlets are on there. Nothing is permanently tight at this point in time. It's just finger tight, as if everything lines up now, tightening it a little bit more isn't really going to make that much of a difference. But both sides of the exhaust are in place, both lower mounts are in place, and the one mount that I can work on right now, it lines up fine, everything's good to go. So now I can pull it off of the car again, put it over on the bench, get a purge started, and get this side of it wrapped up. All right, so after a bit of welding, we now have the bracket on the exhaust. So it's welded on the outside, and then I snaked around on the inside, put some material down there as well. So hopefully this bracket never breaks and never have any cracking issues again with it. So this thing is still really hot. I'm going to let it cool for a few minutes, put it back on the car, and double check the placement of the other side, or the portion of the bracket on the other side. As since I don't have that, really the only thing I can do is weld it on the way that it sits right now. And then it will either be my job to finish it later, or the shop that is doing the repairs on the car. So we'll cross that bridge later, but for the time being, we'll let this cool and do a final test fit. After a few days, and thankfully no real serious trials or tribulations, the Aventador exhaust is repaired and at least as installed as I'm going to install it on the car. So here is what it looks like on the back side here. So pretty nice and symmetrical. Everything's cool. The brackets, or at least the bracket that I was able to put back in its place, sits where it needs to. The other one is lined up well enough where either the repair shop or I'll be able to make it work the way that it needs to. But everything else is good to go, and it is not final installed, as I'm not sure if they still need to take it off to put any other parts back on. I didn't want to make it any more difficult for the actual repair shop than I needed to, but this is what we are left with now. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to start the car. And they left a note specifically stating that the way that it's taken apart right now, it would be able to be started to just bump it from place to place, but So it has something to do with the air pump on the car. And if the car is left to idle or run for any period of time, it could end up damaging the air pump, which I do not want to damage this car in any way, shape, or form. And frankly, I just can't afford to replace anything or fix it if I were to cause any damage to it. But all that being said, the job that I was tasked with is completed, and I'm very happy with the end result. And I hope that the customer is as well. So with that being said, that's going to be about the end of this video. And I know it's something different than what we normally do on this channel, but I figured a repair job like this and a car like this, it was something that warranted having its own video made for it. So hopefully you guys appreciated it. But with that being said, it's going to be about the end of this one. So thank you guys as always for tuning in, for watching all the different projects that I work on here, whether it be Neons or Supras or Lamborghinis now, I guess. They're all fun. I still really enjoy this stuff, and I'm thankful that you guys have chosen to come along on this journey with me. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much, and I hope to see you guys for time and time to come. But that will be the end of this episode. So until next time, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next episode.